for July, guess who we'll be preaching on? David. David. Most of us know a little bit about David from Sunday school and Bible school. And Vacation Bible School will be when? July 30th to August 4th. Okay. Most of us know a little bit about David. We know the story of his killing Goliath, how, the giant Goliath, and David went out with only five smooth stones and no armor or anything, and he killed the giant Goliath. We know maybe about the Bathsheba, of his seduction of Bathsheba and his having Uriah killed. After that, we probably don't know much. Most of the story of David probably shouldn't be told in Bible school or Sunday school. They're at least R-rated, maybe X-rated. If we think cable news is full of what's going on, the stories of David would keep cable news alive 25 hours a day. It's the stuff that you read about in the checkout line at the supermarket. There's adultery, there's multiple marriages, there are concubines, there's seduction, there's divorce, there's murder, there's violence, there's betrayal. It's everything that kind of keeps us going and keeps us in the checkout line longer than we should be reading those magazines. David is frequently a story of relationships. I mean, you can think of all the names that surround David. We probably know more about David than any Old Testament figure. There's Samuel, who anoints David as a young boy. There's Saul, with whom he has a very conflicted relationship. There's Jonathan, his great friend. There is Bathsheba. There's Michal, one of his wives, who berates him in public. David's family is full of it's a messed up family. It's really a messed up family. Just one story, there's a story of Absalom, who had a sister named Tamar and a half-brother named Amnon, who would have been Tamar's half-brother. Amnon had lusted after Tamar and eventually seduced her and forced himself on her. Absalom had Amnon at a family picnic killed. Then Absalom went out and tried to overthrow David. I mean, my gosh, you think you got problems with your kids. What a mess this is. Two relationships that were in the reading today were the story of it was David's feelings around the death of Saul and the death of Jonathan. And it's a miraculous piece, I think, of political spin of what David does here. Saul tried to kill David a couple of times and obviously was not successful. Saul and his son Jonathan were killed in the Battle of Gilboa, fighting the Philistines. This opened the door for David to become king. David has to give a speech of public mourning to the country. And what he does is he doesn't berate Saul, as he easily could, because Saul tried to kill him on numerous occasions. But he also doesn't say that he's grieving Saul. What he says is, Saul was mighty, And Israel profited by Saul. And Israel apparently had good economic times under Saul. But he doesn't say his heart is broken. He just says Saul was good for the country. But it's very different when he starts to talk about Jonathan. And he says, my heart is broken, and I am grieving over Jonathan. And then he has this line that is much debated. My love for Jonathan was greater than the love I would have for a woman. What does he mean there? That is speculated. But they had a great love for each other, and his heart is broken. One of the things we know about David is that he is imperfect. His story, as I said, is a story of lust. It's a story of betrayal. It's a story of murder. It's a story of having an inconvenient husband killed. It's a story of having prophets call him on the carpet. It's a story of having his wife Michal call him on the carpet. He is imperfect. And I think that's why we like him. Christians suffer from perfectionism. We think we have to be perfect. And here's the great David, very imperfect, very broken. We have trouble relating to perfect people. People have trouble relating to me for that reason. But we can relate to broken people, can't we? I might not be able to relate to that student who gets nothing but straight A's. But I can relate to that student who gets B's and C's and D's. Because I've gotten B's and C's and D's. I might not be able to relate to that perfect parent whose kids are perfect. But I can relate to a parent who's concerned about his child who's battling alcohol or drug abuse. I can relate to a parent who's been broken. Perfection is not our common ground. Brokenness is our common ground. And we can relate to David in his brokenness. You got family problems, I got family problems. We can talk to each other. You lost your job, I lost my job. We can relate to each other. The other thing we know about David is we know his interior life. He's a historical character that we know the events of his life. But we know the interior of his life. We know what's not only going on in his head and around him, we know what's going on in his heart. For he wrote so many of the Psalms. And his Psalms are just out there. They're a window to his soul. They're a window to his prayer life with God. In the midst of all of his sin and all of his messed upness, he has this prayer life that we know of. We don't know public figures' prayer lives or their motivation very well. That's why we have cable news to speculate endlessly on it. But there's David telling us what his motivation is, what his guilt is, what his shame is. Why, he's just like us. We like it I think. When we read about Mother Teresa and her doubts, why, she's not as perfect as I thought. She has doubts. We know that from her journal. It's what appeals to me about Paul. That which I don't want to do, I do. And what I do, I don't want to do. And there's no health in me. Yeah, I'm always screwing up. I do a lot of stuff. I say a lot of stupid stuff I don't mean to say. And Paul tells us that's how he is. Ling Lam, talked about his interior life. And that was much of his appeal to us. He talked about being lonely and feeling isolated and being bullied and being lost. That interior life. Psalm 51 for David, after he realizes his sin, and the prophet Nathan has called him on the carpet for his affair with Bathsheba and having her husband killed. He says, create in me a clean heart. Help me start over. I've been screwed up since the day I was born. It's a psalm of his shame. I am bad. And Psalm 23, his relationship with God. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. When I go through the valley of the shadow of death, you are with me. In Psalm 130 that Dan read, some translations say, out of the depths I call to you. Out of the depths. I'm in deep water. I'm in deep doo-doo. I'm in over my head. My arms are too short and they're too weak to pull me out. I need help. Just learned that my partner has cancer. I'm in deep water. I just learned that my father died. I'm in deep water. I just learned that my child is addicted. I'm in over my head. We've had those experiences of being in deep water. And David says, hope in the Lord more than those who look for the morning. Hope in the Lord. Wait on the Lord. With David, there's fame and there's power and there's amazing celebrity. He must have been on the cover of magazines every week. But there's vulnerability and weakness and humility, and that's why we like him. For all his fallibility, David centered his life on God and around God. And his story is a story of God taking that raw person and working with him. And it's like God says to David repeatedly, I'm not done with you. I'm not done with you. I'm not done with you. And David continuing to turn to God and say, help me. Help me. Please don't be done with me. Hope that David talks about is really just the belief that God hasn't quit. For David, it was God's love that created his worth, not his worth that made God love him. It was God's love that created his worth. Sunday night, some of you heard Ling Lam talk about pain, shame, and resilience. The pain was his personal story, and it was a story of being in deep water. And the shame was his wrestling with that pain and believing that it was his fault, that all of that pain was due to him. And the resilience was his, what he called, finding a safe connection. It was the resilience that led him out of the pain and the shame. The safe connection. And I think it's that safe connection that David had. Regardless, he could feel safe with God and feel connected to God. God was his sanctuary. Jesus was often called the Son of David. Heal me, Son of David. Have mercy on me, Son of David. Hear me, Son of David. It was a title the people gave to Jesus. Now, I always thought he was called Son of David because he was so powerful and he was so mighty, because Jesus is so powerful and mighty. That might be true, but I don't think that anymore. I think he was called Son of David because people could relate to him. People knew that he understood them. People knew that he understood their brokenness. And it was their brokenness where Jesus met them. Jesus, in Hebrews, it says, Jesus is a high priest who is sympathetic to our illnesses and our griefs. People also called him Son of David because he was centered on God. And he helped people find that safe connection that would get them through life and heal them and save them. We take communion today, and we celebrate the Son of David. We come forward with our brokenness, and we receive the broken bread of Jesus' body. And we connect in our brokenness to his brokenness. And we come forward not only to share and give our brokenness to Jesus, but we come forward to reestablish that safe connection in the midst of our pain that helps us overcome pain and shame, whatever deep water we're in. Communion is the hope that we look for in the morning. It's the awareness that God has not quit on us. May it be so.